With the rise of the internet and social media, everyday sexism is becoming more and more common. In this day and age, it's not unusual to see a misogynistic comment on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or on a YouTube video. But what's even more appalling than the comments themselves is the responses people have to them. One person voicing their discrimination attracts a whole crowd of people who feel the same way. The Facebook groups, Twitter pages, and Instagram accounts that support this misanthropic behavior only encourages sexism to a greater extent by using group polarization. And even if people don't respond to this behavior, even if they disagree with it, many do not bother to get involved. People are so accustomed to this behavior that they have become indifferent. In the grand scheme of things, how will this unconcerned attitude affect women in the real world? My research topic centers around how disinhibition affects online sexism, and how this social media misogyny in turn affects the day-to-day lives of women. The first thing I learned when doing research on this topic is that there is a specific name for when lack of self-control leads to online disinhibition. This is called the online disinhibition effect. A term coined by Professor John Soler, Ph.D., occurs when people say and do things in cyberspace that they wouldn't ordinarily say or do in the face-to-face world. Although this can sometimes lead to positive behavior, known as benign disinhibition, it overwhelmingly leads to the opposite, known as toxic disinhibition. According to Soler, there are 6 leading factors that contribute to the online disinhibition effect. Asynchronous means not occurring at the same time or rate. Asynchronicity online refers to the fact that most times, people do not interact with each other in real time, unlike in a face-to-face conversation, where one person speaks and they immediately expect a response. This asynchronicity disinhibits people because it creates a feeling of being separated from the person giving the response, therefore leading to less inhibition. Solipsistic introjection has to do with how, when online, one often assigns strangers voices, oftentimes one's own voice. This leads to disinhibition because people feel less inhibited when talking to themselves than they do when talking to others. The other factors, dissociative anonymity, dissociative imagination, minimalization of authority, and invisibility, are pretty self-explanatory. Oftentimes, people online tend to hide behind fake names or have no identity at all. This sense of dissociative anonymity greatly encourages disinhibition because it leads people to believe that they can't and won't be held accountable for their actions, leading them to say and do things that they usually wouldn't do. This can especially be seen with online sexism and misogyny. In a 2015 study conducted by Ohio State University, participants were asked to use the sexist hashtag #GetBackInTheKitchen in tweets or retweets, with either anonymous profiles or profiles that contain their names and information. Participants whose profiles were anonymous tweeted sexist comments at a greater rate than those who had identical profiles did. So why does sexual harassment and misogyny exist online so pervasively? Cultural values, including societal norms and values, translate online. The patriarchy paved the way in the early days of the internet, where only 10 to 20% of the internet users were women. This lack of balance helped create a system where online norms were determined unproportionately, resulting in a culture of elevated openness, bravado, and hegemony, creating an environment in which abuse is both easy and allowed, which are factors that precipitate harassment. The internet is one of the only places where one can express blunt discrimination or sexism online without facing repercussions. In fact, people who spew these misanthropic attitudes may even be rewarded for their behavior by people with the same beliefs. The internet has been known to unite individuals. Hate groups perpetuate negative attitudes and beliefs, such as sexism, amplifying them because of group polarization. The online disinhibition effect plus the unbalanced social norms together help create the perfect place for misogyny to grow. Some researchers have even nicknamed the internet the Penta-A engine, suggesting that discrimination and harassment occurs online so much because of anonymity, access, affordability, acceptability, and aloneness. According to Barbara Ritter, Ph.D., the internet has led women to face more sexual harassment and misogyny, creating new forms of exploitation and intimidation. This occurrence, known as cybersexual harassment, can be seen in cyberstalking, email harassment, cyber defamation, and hacking. As stated by Ritter, gender harassment is the most pervasive form of cybersexual harassment. This harassment can be seen in almost any place, on almost any social media platform. Since the internet is everywhere, weaved intricately into every part of our day-to-day lives, online sexism can go anywhere, including professional and academic settings, such as work and school environments. CSH ranges from backhanded comments and hashtags to abhorrent slurs and intense threats. Women don't ask for this kind of behavior. A woman trying to simply exist on the internet may receive lewd comments and be the target of sexism, simply because of what gender she identifies as. And if a woman gets targeted by sexism for simply existing on the internet, imagine what happens when they choose to speak their mind. They might receive assault and death threats from anonymous users online for having an opinion or disagreeing with someone. Amanda Hess, a journalist who has written for the Los Angeles Times and the New York Times, wrote an extensive article specifically discussing the online abuse she has faced. She wrote about the threats of death and sexual assault that she faced on Twitter by anonymous users, about the Twitter page created solely for plotting her death, and about the anonymous person who stalked her for 4 years, following her across social media with abuse. She spoke of the fear and paranoia she faced, how she felt like she couldn't be safe. Hess's story isn't an irregular one. As she writes in her article, none of the abuse she faces makes her exceptional. It just makes her a woman with an internet connection. Although virtual, the online sexism and harassment that women face online tends to lead to offline consequences. According to an article in The Psychiatrist, individuals, especially young people, who face online abuse are at a higher risk for depression, substance abuse, and score higher on scales of anxiety, phobic anxiety, paranoia, and depression. As misogynistic abuse is a form of online harassment, the same effect can be assumed for cybersexual harassment. An example of the impact that cybersexual harassment has on personal well-being can be seen in the story of Amanda Todd. After posting a video about her experience online, her story went viral, getting over 17 million views on YouTube as of 2014. Her story detailed how she faced constant sexual harassment and cyberbullying online from an anonymous user. The person stalked her for years, blackmailing her into exploiting herself sexually online and then sending the material to everyone she knew. The cyber abuse led to offline bullying, forcing Amanda to switch schools several times. Wherever she went, the anonymous person followed her, and at 15, she committed suicide. The stories and statistics show unanimously that the harassment women face online has incredible real-world and personal effects. So how can this be changed? In a news article by Yvette Cooper, a British Labour Party politician and previous Member of Parliament, Cooper describes some of the ways that we could end this problem. She discusses the addition of new guidelines and laws to help people get protection that they so often feel they don't have. She brings up the point that social media sites should have rules and regulations on cybersexual harassment and online abuse like offline organizations do. Cooper also states that a way to stop this malicious behavior in the future is to prevent the next generation from thinking online misogyny, racism, or hatred is okay. She speaks of creating better sex and relationship education in schools to promote respect in relationships and zero tolerance of violence or threats. Whatever we do, it needs to be done soon. The internet's reach and impact is growing at an exponential rate, and online misogyny and abuse is following in its footsteps, lurking in the shadows. As Cooper concludes her article, it's time for women and men to stand together against sexist abuse, misogyny, racism, and violent threats online, so the web can be the amazing democratic space we need it to be. It's time to reclaim the internet.